Hello, welcome to the second video lecture on the various types of novel. In the previous video, we discussed a few major um, subgenres of fiction or novel. Science fiction. So this is relatively modern literary genre. Science fiction is also often abbreviated as sci-fi. Writers in the past have also dealt with scientific themes common to modern science fiction, but their stories were more speculative and contained fantasy or horror. The genre formally emerged in the West, where the social transformations wrought by the Industrial Revolution first led writers and intellectuals to deduce the future impact of technology on society. Standard science fiction is developed around certain themes such as space travel, robots, alien or extraterrestrial beings, altered states of consciousness, and time travel. The features of science fiction include prophetic warnings, utopian aspirations, elaborate scenarios for entirely imaginary worlds, titanic disasters, strange voyages, political agitations, presented in the form of sermons or meditations, satires, allegories, and parodies. Science fiction exhibits every conceivable attitude towards the process of technosocial change, from cynical despair to cosmic bliss. Critics have noted similarities between sci fi and Gothic fiction, with its interest in the speculative and the monstrous. Mary Shelley's Frankenstein, published in 1818, is considered as one of the earliest sci fi novels. This novel tells the story of a man made monster who assumes godlike power, which later leads to disasters and culminates in a tragedy. Jules Verne's Journey to the Center of the Earth, Around the World in 80 Days, and 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea are all considered path-breaking novels in science fiction, as they introduce the theme of exploration using technology. The title, Father of Science Fiction, is credited to H.G. Wells. Wells was a trained scientist and an accomplished author. H.G. Wells wrote The Time Machine in 1895, depicting time travel. His other famous novels include The War of the Worlds in 1898, which is a prototype of alien invasion fiction, and The First Men on the Moon in 1901, where H.G. Wells termed his novels as scientific romances. With the emergence of works by renowned writers like Aldous Huxley and C.S. Lewis, sci fi was accepted as a major literary genre. During the post war period, nuclear warfare and space exploration gave a realistic touch to the fantasy world of science fiction. By the 21st century, science fiction had become much more than a literary genre. Its enthusiastic fans and practitioners constitute a flourishing global group. Cyberpunk fiction. Cyberpunk fiction is a post modern subgenre of science fiction. It emerged in the 1980s as a revolt against traditional science fiction. It is characterized by countercultural anti-heroes trapped in a dehumanized and high-tech future. The word cyberpunk was coined by American writer Bruce Bethke, who wrote a story with that title in 1980. He derived the term cyber from the word cybernetics, which is the science of replacing human functions with computerized machines. The word punk is taken from the jarring music and pessimistic sensibility prevalent in youth culture during the 1970s and the 1980s. These youth were concerned with individual freedom and strong anti establishment views. The cyberpunk protagonist is often an anti hero. He or she will often be an antisocial loner with a strong sense of misery, helplessness, depression, and dystopic ideals. The story is often set in a dehumanized and a futuristic society with advanced technology such as cybernetics and artificial intelligence. The roots of the cyberpunk novel extend past Bethke's story to the technological fiction of the 1940s and 50s, to the writings on the themes of alienation in a high tech future that addressed the social and scientific concerns of that day. William Gibson's 1984 novel Neuromancer is considered the first cyberpunk novel. It started off this movement within the science fiction genre. It was William Gibson who introduced cyberspace in science fiction. The conventional notions of heroism are questioned in cyberpunk fiction. The heroes of cyberpunk fiction are mainly computer hackers, criminals, and anarchists who create issues in society. Detective fiction is an integral part of contemporary literature. It usually presents a crime that may involve a murder or a mystery which is finally solved, and the mystery is revealed to the readers after a successful investigation by the protagonist, who is usually a detective, a police officer. The history of detective or crime fiction starts from the 19th century. Edgar Allan Poe was a very popular writer, the American short story writer who published the first volume of this genre, titled Tales of the Grotesque and the Arabesque in 1840. It was Poe who introduced the first fictional detective with the character Auguste Dupin. He appeared in The Murders in the Rue Morgue, published in 1841. The name Dupin suggests the word dupe or deception. So, Dupin utilizes deception in order to obtain the information that he requires to solve a case. Many of this Dupin's characteristics has heavily influenced the character portrayals of detectives throughout the 19th and the early 20th centuries. So, Dupin's characteristic traits include a cold and logical method of problem solving and an intense reading for clues. He emphasizes on the intense reading for clues, and he comes from an upper class background. So, this kind of characteristic traits remain consistent when you look at how fictional detectives have been portrayed by the authors. The Purloined Letter is also another famous story by Edgar Allan Poe. If Poe was the inventor of detective or crime fiction, it was Arthur Conan Doyle who is attributed with elevating it into a very popular literary genre in the late 1880s. Poe has written only three detective stories featuring Dupin, but Arthur Conan Doyle has created 56 short stories and four novels featuring the immortal detective character Sherlock Holmes and his companion Dr. Watson. The four novels written by Sir Arthur Conan Doyle are A Study in Scarlet, The Sign of Four, The Hound of the Baskervilles, and The Valley of Fear. G.K. Chesterton is considered to be the father of the cozy murder mystery or the whodunit, the kind of detective story that was very popular throughout the early half of the 20th century, which is also called the Golden Age in detective fiction. Chesterton's fiction centered on a detective priest named Father Brown. The inspiration for making his or creating his detective character, who is an unassuming priest, came out of Chesterton's friendship with a priest, a Roman Catholic priest named John O'Connor. The first 12 Father Brown stories appeared in America in the Saturday Evening Post in 1910. Later, they were published in England as a collection titled The Innocence of Father Brown. Agatha Christie remains the best selling crime novelist of all time. She is best known for her 66 detective novels and 14 short story collections, as well as the world's longest running murder mystery play in the history of theatre titled The Mouse Trap, which was first published in 1952. Her first detective novel, The Mysterious Affair at Styles, in 1920, featured Hercule Poirot, a former Belgian police officer with a twirling, magnificent moustache and an egg shaped head. Poirot soon became one of the most famous and long lived fictional detective characters. He has appeared in 33 novels and more than 50 short stories published between 1920 and 1975. Agatha Christie has also introduced an elderly British spinster, Miss Jane Marple, as an amateur detective in her short story collection, The 13 Problems, in 1927. It is said that Miss Marple was actually based on, or the character of Miss Marple was based on Christie's own grandmother. A prolific writer, Agatha Christie had an amazing skill in making the least likely suspect turn out to be the actual murderer. Other well known detective fiction writers include Earl Stanley Gardner, the American writer. He created Perry Mason, who is an American defense lawyer who solves crimes. The modern crime novel mostly focuses on the criminal and the psychological working of the criminal's mind. Another type of detective novel is called the police novel, which features a police detective as the protagonist. Utopian fiction is a genre of literature that explores um, a perfect world. Utopia, the term means an ideal place that ensures a peaceful government where there are no problems, equality for all, safe environment, no war, disease, poverty, oppression, discrimination, inequality, and so on. The term can be traced back to Plato's Republic. It is a pun on two Greek words, utopos, which means good place, and autopos, which means no place. It was first used in English literature by Sir Thomas More in 1516 in his Latin work titled Utopia. Thomas More's Utopia is tolerant towards religion. It condemns money. It's a very ideal and a calm and peaceful place. Other examples of literary utopias include Francis Bacon's New Atlantis, published in 1626, Samuel Butler's Airborne in 1872, and H.G. Wells' A Modern Utopia in 1905. A dystopia or anti utopia, on the other hand, is a world in which nothing is perfect. The problems that plague this world, um, it portrays a nightmarish future because of various sci fi elements. And dystopia is a play on the word utopia. It uses the prefix dys, dys, which means very bad or very difficult. So, dystopian novels were critical or skeptical of ideal worlds and totalitarian thought. Some examples include Aldous Huxley's Brave New World in 1932 and George Orwell's 1984, published in 1949. Dystopian fictional features also includes an oppressive government or no government at all, and extreme poverty for everyone. A dystopian world usually imposes a ban on free thinking, independent thought, and so on. The last genre in prose fiction that we will discuss in this video is Bildungsroman. Bildungsroman is a German term. It describes a kind of novel that focuses on the psychological and moral growth of the protagonist from childhood through youth to adulthood and maturity. Bildung in German means development of the self through knowledge or education. The protagonist goes through many difficulties in this quest for identity. Such novels are also called coming of age novels. The first novel in this genre is Goethe's Wilhelm Meister's Apprenticeship, published in 1796. Other English novels which can be cited as examples include Henry Fielding's The History of Tom Jones, A Foundling, then Charles Dickens' David Copperfield, James Joyce's A Portrait of the Artist as a Young Man, Gunter Grass's The Tin Drum, etc. The journey of the protagonist in a Bildungsroman novel often culminates in fulfillment, leading to a kind of enlightenment. The main conflict is between the personality of the protagonist and the socio-economic, scientific, or religious orthodoxies of the time. In the 19th century, the Bildungsroman genre saw publication of novels which were overly transgressive in the arenas of sexuality and sexual politics. Examples are Gustav Flaubert's Madame Bovary in 1857 and Leo Tolstoy's Anna Karenina in 1874 or 1876. These such novels challenged social conventions by depicting women characters whose psychological development included an awareness of their sexualities. The modern Bildungsroman novels focus on the fragmented self of the protagonist. Now, Virginia Woolf's writings, for instance, declare that the female growth is impractical within the framework of conventional marriage and domesticity. So, when you look at modern Bildungsroman novel, you find there is a special focus on the female subjectivity under hegemonic patriarchal societies. The post-modernist Bildungsroman novels have brought to light issues such as the marginalized, feminist interpretations, queer writings, and so on. So these are new genres that are coming in. There are lesbian and gay narratives which openly challenge conservative beliefs. The Bildungsroman novel conveys a sense of realism because the protagonists are ordinary people whom you find in society. They are also very sensitive people who suffer because of the vices of society, and this ultimately changes the course of their lives. The psychological and moral growth of the protagonist in the Bildungsroman provides a deep insight into the character, and the readers can easily identify themselves with these characters who pass through different stages of their lives until they reach maturity. The Nobel laureate Kazuo Ishigura's Japanese novel Never Let Me Go, published in 2005, is a recent example. Though the postmodernist cynicism towards fixed subjectivities challenged the notion of growing up, the Bildungsroman genre has reinvented itself and continues to flourish in the field of literature. So, with this, we come to an end of this video lecture on various types of novel. I hope you found this lecture useful. Thank you so much for your patient listening. Stay home and stay safe.